The Phase, a practical guide for lucid dreaming and out of body travel. Translated by Peter Orange. Forward. I believe that everybody is going to exist in two worlds soon. The practice of phase states of the mind is the hottest and most promising pursuit of the modern age. Unlike in the past, the notions of outer body experience and astral projection have already lost their mystical halo, and the real basis have been studied in minute detail from the most non-nonsense approach. Now, this phenomenon is acceptable to everyone regardless of their worldview. It is now known how to easily master it and apply it effectively. This guidebook is a result of 10 years of extremely active personal practice and the study of outer body phenomenon, otherwise known as the phase, coupled with having successfully taught it to thousands of people. I know all the obstacles and problems that are usually run into when getting to know this phenomenon, and have tried to protect future practitioners from them in this book. This guidebook was not created for those who prefer light, empty readings. It is for those who would like to learn something. It contains no speculations or stories, only dry, hard facts and techniques in combination with a completely pragmatic approach and clear procedures for action. They have all been successfully verified by a vast number of practitioners that often had no prior experience. In order to achieve the same result, it is only necessary to read through each section thoroughly and complete the assignments. It gives each and every person something that previously could only be dreamt about, a parallel reality and the possibility of existing in two worlds. The book is beneficial not only for beginners but also for those who already know what it feels like to have an outer body encounter and have a certain amount of an experience, as this guidebook is devoted not only to the entire of the entering of the state, but also equally dedicated to controlling it. Contrary to popular opinion, there is nothing difficult about this phenomenon if one tries to attain it with regular and right effort. On average, results are reached in less than a week. More often than not, the techniques work in literally a couple of attempts. Part 1. Get phased within 3 days. Quick introductions for novices. Success rate for 1 to 5 attempts, 1 to 3 days, 50%. For 6 to 10 attempts within a 2 to 7 day time span will be 80%. And for 11 to 20 attempts within a 3 to 14 day time span will be at 90%. We give all our learning materials for free. If you have any opportunity to help, you can support our researchers. We urgently need your help. The phenomenon. Way back when people did not have consciousness, yet once it developed, it gradually started occupying more and more of the waking state. However, nowadays consciousness is outgrowing the waking state and has begun continuing its expansion into other states. Consciousness increasingly springs up during REM phase sleep, giving rise to the most astounding phenomenon of human existence, feeling oneself in an outer body experience. It is probable that men and women of the future will have conscious existence in two worlds. For now, however, this is only be accomplished using the special techniques described in this book. Here we have a Venn diagram of REM sleep, the phase, and consciousness. Hints at the occurrence of the phenomenon may be found in the Bible and other ancient texts. It lies at the foundation of other phenomena, such as near-death experience, alien abductions, sleep paralysis, and so on. The following phenomenon is so extraordinary that many occult movements consider experiencing it to be an accomplishment of the highest order. Statistical research has shown that 1 person in 2 will have an intense encounter with it. Meanwhile, the existence of the phenomenon itself has been a scientific fact since the 1970s. The phenomenon is well represented in many different kinds of modern practices, albeit under various names, ranging from astral projection and outer body experience to lucid dreaming. We shall use the pragmatic term, the phase or phase states, to refer to all the above phenomenon, as there is no difference at all between them and their usual practice. That's opinion. We will also take as a materialist an approach as possible, casting aside all theoretical tripe and concerning ourselves with only what works in practice. As regards sensory perception of the phenomenon itself, This is not a mere visualization exercise. Reality itself is but a dual daydream in comparison to the phase state. You won't feel your physical body in bed there, and all of your senses will be fully immersed in a new world of perception. You can touch and behold anything, walk and fly, eat, drink, feel pain, pleasure, and much more. And all with this, even more realism and lucidness of perception than daily life. This is the reason many novices experience shock or even mortal fear upon entering this state. It's a true parallel world in terms of perception. And the practical side of the phenomena also holds even greater opportunity. In the phase, you can travel to the earth, universe, and time itself. You can meet any person you want, friends and family, the deceased, and celebrities. Time has no constraint. You can obtain information from the phase and apply it towards improving your daily life. It can influence your physiology and treat a number of ailments. It can realize your secret desires and develop your creativity. Meanwhile, people with physical impairments can release themselves from all fetters and obtain anything lacking for them in the physical world. And all of this is just the tip of the iceberg of ways to apply the phenomenon in daily life. You may think that it's difficult to learn if you read elsewhere, that you need to spend months, if not years, on it. Get those old wives' tales out of your head. We're in the 21st century now. The instructions laid out in this section will help most people to experience their amazing state within 2 to 3 days of trying. Remember, the technique described in this book are the results of many years of experimental research at the Phase Research Center. Thousands have participated firsthand in developing and perfecting the techniques represented here and have proven that they can be used absolutely by everyone. All that you need to do is follow these simple instructions as exactly and carefully as you can. Then you will be able to literally live in 2 worlds. There are 3 primary methods for leaving the body. They are used at different times of the day, after sleeping, while sleeping, and without sleeping beforehand. We will begin getting experience using the techniques by starting from the easiest one, the indirect technique, which is performed immediately upon awakening. They are quite simple. After mastering these techniques, you can try to leave your body in the evening or during the day without sleeping beforehand. The indirect method, step-by-step instructions. So if you decided to experience outer body sensation and want to achieve this as quickly as possible, to that end, here we present a brief description of the easiest method, cycles of indirect techniques. This is a universal and most effective way to obtain a phase experience. It has been refined by the Phase Research Centers, work with thousands of people all over the world. The secret to indirect techniques is to perform them upon awakening, when the human brain is psychologically quiet, close to the phase state, or still in it. An interesting fact: the indirect techniques are mainly to thank for the 80% success rate over only 2 days of attempts at 3-day seminars. Even groups of 50 people and more, once more than half of the group has had a phase experience by the second day, and most had 2 or more experiences. Cycles of indirect techniques consist of attempts to separate immediately upon awakening, and if that is unsuccessful, then quickly cycling through techniques over the course of a minute until one of them works, after which it is possible to separate from the body. Usually 1 to 5 properly performed attempts are all that is necessary to obtain results. The techniques described below work extremely well, both when awakening from a daytime nap as well as in the middle of the night. However, we will be concentrating on the optimum strategy, the deferred method, which allows for numerous attempts to be had in a single day. This substantially increases the probability of success occurring in only 1 to 3 days. Step 1. Sleep 6 hours and then wake up with an alarm clock. On the night before a free day, when you won't have to wake up early, go to bed at your usual time. Set your alarm so that you'll only sleep for about 6 hours. When the alarm goes off, you must get up to drink a glass of water, go to the bathroom, read these instructions again, do as you please. Do not attempt any techniques before going to bed and night before, no matter what the case. You just need to lie down and get some sound sleep. The sounder your sleep over these 6 hours, the better your chances of getting results. Step 2. Go back to sleep with the intention. After 3 to 50 minutes of being awake, go back to bed. Concentrate your attention on how you will perform cycles of indirect techniques upon each subsequent awakening in order to leave your body and implement your prepared plan of action. No need to set the alarm clock this time. Each subsequent awakening should occur naturally. If it's too bright in the room, you can wear a special eye mask. If it's loud, use earplugs. Following is a deferred method for indirect techniques. Meanwhile, focus your attention on how you're going to try to wake up without moving your physical body. This isn't mandatory, but it will substantially increase the effectiveness of the indirect technique. Now, sleep for 2 to 4 hours, but take advantage of natural awakenings that occur during this period of time. They will happen much more often than usual after each attempt, whether successful or not. You must fall back to sleep with that every same intention of waking up and trying again. This way you can make many attempts over the course of a single morning. Up to a quarter of those attempts will be successful even for novices. 70 to 95% of them will be successful for experienced practitioners. Step 3. Separate the instant you awake. Each time you wake up again, try not to move or open your eyes. Instead, immediately try to separate from your body. Up to 50% of success with indirect techniques come during this simple first step. One that is so simple that people don't even suspect that it could work. In order to separate from your body, simply try to stand up, roll, or levitate. Try to do it with your own perception, subtle body, but without moving your actual physical muscles. Remember that it will feel just like normal physical movement when the movement comes. Don't think too hard about it. During those first moments after the awakening, stubbornly try to separate from your body any way that you can, and no matter what. Most likely, you'll intuitively know how to do it. The most important thing, though, is not to think too hard and not to lose those first seconds of awakening. Interesting fact, during the second lesson at Faith School seminars, participants are asked to explain on their own words how they are able to separate, but without using the words easily, simply, or as usual. They are usually always unable to comply with such a request, as separation nearly always occurs for them easily, simply, and as usual when the moment is right. Step 4. Cycling techniques after attempts to separate. If immediate separation doesn't work out for you, which would become apparent after 3 to 5 seconds, start right then and there to alternate between 2 to 3 of the techniques that are most straightforward to you until one of them works. When this happens, you can try to separate again. Choose 2 to 3 of the following 5 techniques so that you can alternate through them during awakening. Rotation. For 3 to 5 seconds, try to imagine rotating to either side along your head to toe axis as vividly as possible. If no sensation arises, switch to another technique. If a real or even slight sensation of rotation arises, focus your attention on this technique and rotate even more energetically. As soon as the sensation of rotating becomes stable and real, you should try to separate again, using it as a starting point. The swimmer's technique. For 3 to 5 seconds, try to imagine as decidedly as possible that you are swimming, or simply making swimming motions with your arms. Try to feel it no matter what, and as vividly as you can. If nothing happens, switch to another technique. There is no need to switch techniques if the sensation of swimming arises. However, instead, intensify the sensation that arises. Afterwards, the real sensation of swimming in water will come to you. That's already the phase, and there's no need for separation when you're already in the phase. However, if such sensations occur while you're in bed instead of a body of water, then you will need to employ a separation technique. Use the swimming sensations as a starting point. The third technique is the observing images. Peer into the void before your closed eyes for 3 to 5 seconds. Nothing occurs, switch to another technique. If you see any kind of imagery, peer into it until it becomes realistic. Once it is, separate from the body right then and there and allow yourself to be pulled into the imagery. When peering at imagery, it's important not to scrutinize details, lest the image wash away. You will need to look through the picture, which will make it more realistic. Hand visualization. For 3 to 5 seconds, imagine vividly and decidedly that you are rubbing your hands together close to your eyes. Try no matter what to feel them in front of you, to see them, and even to hear the sound of them rubbing. If nothing happens, switch to another technique. If any of the above sensations start to arise, however, then keep with the technique and intensify it until it has become totally realistic. Afterwards, you can try to separate from the body using the sensations arising from the techniques as a start-off point. And the last, phantom wiggling. Try to wiggle your perceived hands or feet for 3 to 5 seconds. Do not move a muscle under any circumstances. Do not imagine the movement itself. For example, try to intensively press down and then up, wiggle to the left and the right, and so on. If nothing occurs, switch to another technique. If a slight or sluggish sensation of real movement suddenly arises, however, then focus your attention on the technique. Try to increase the range of motion as much as you can. Once you can move by at least 4 inches, immediately try to separate from your body, starting off from the sensation arising from the technique. All that you need to do for each attempt is alternate between 2 to 3 techniques for 3 to 5 seconds each. This leads to indirect technique cycles, where the practitioner alternates one technique after another over the course of a minute in search of one that works. It is very important to do no less than 4 cycles of 2 to 3 techniques during an attempt. Remember, even if a technique doesn't work immediately, that doesn't mean that it will not work on the very next cycle of techniques, if not just a bit later. That's precisely why it's necessary to stubbornly alternate techniques, performing no less than 4 complete cycles, but all within no longer than a minute. For example, the entire process may take place as follows. Phaser goes to bed at 11:30 p.m., sets his alarm for 6 a.m. At 6, he wakes up to his alarm clock, goes to the bathroom, drinks some water, recalls the indirect techniques as well as his interesting plan of action for the phase. For example, to look in the mirror and fly to Mars would be a good example. At 6:05, the phaser goes back to sleep with the clear intention of entering the phase upon each subsequent awakening. At 7:35 a.m. or whenever you awake, phaser awakes unexpectedly and immediately tries to separate from his body then and there. Not having separated within 3 to 5 seconds, the phaser begins to try to do rotation, but those also do not work. Within 3 to 5 seconds, the phaser performs a swimming technique, but those do not work as well. He goes on to the phantom wiggling, but it doesn't work either within 3 to 5 seconds. The phaser does rotation again, then the swimmer technique, and the phantom wiggling for 3 to 5 seconds each. Then he once again goes and does rotation, swimming, and phantom wiggling for 3 to 5 seconds each. On the 4th cycle, he begins to do the rotation, and it unexpectedly starts working. Feeling of rotation arises, the phaser keeps with this technique and spins as hard as he can and separates from his body right then and there using the sensation of rotation. He then runs to the mirror, all the while actively palpitating and scrutinizing everything around him from a close distance, which intensifies his sensations. Having already looked in the mirror, the practitioner employs the translocation technique and finds himself on Mars, but he is unexpectedly returned to the body. The phaser then immediately tries to leave his body again, but is unable to. He falls back to sleep with the clear intention of repeating the attempt upon the next awakening and staying longer on Mars, and so on. Just repeat the above using the techniques that come most naturally to you, and you will open yourself up to a whole new universe. If you take 20 to 30 minutes out of your day to simply train the techniques and the procedures, the method will be remembered and work better. This will substantially increase the success of attempts upon awakening. Dream consciousness is also considered to be a phase experience. You suddenly realize that you are becoming a while asleep, then that's already the phase. You should therefore proceed to implement your plan of action and stabilize the state. If the dream consciousness does not arise, if the dream consciousness does arise, it would be a side effect of doing technique cycles upon awakening. This side effect is quite common. Always be ready for it. Step 5. After the attempt, fall back to sleep if you can after each attempt, whether successful or not, in order to make another attempt to leave your body upon your next awakening. That way you'll not only be able to leave your body in one day, but also do it several times on the very first day. Even the most unsuccessful attempt should last no longer than a minute. If nothing happens over that period of time, it's much more effective to fall asleep and catch the next awakening, as opposed to stubbornly trying to squeeze results out of the current attempt. Plan of action in the phase. Before entering the phase, you should clearly outline what you're going to do there immediately after separation. This will increase both the quality of the experience and the likelihood of it occurring. Below is a list of the most interesting, if not the most straightforward, phase activities. For novices, choose no more than 2 to 3 activities and remember them well. Look in a mirror, eat or drink something you like, visit the tourist attraction, fly over the earth, fly through the universe. It's bound only by your imagination. For your first phase, be sure to set yourself the goal of making it to a mirror and looking at your reflection. You should specifically program yourself to do this actively, as it will subsequently facilitate your first steps into conquering the phase. You may then complete other items on your plan of action and never return to the mirror again. If your sensation in the phase are dull, i.e. poor sight or numbed bodily sensations, try to touch everything around you actively and scrutinize the minute details, objects from up close. This will allow you to have more realistic experience. The same activities should be performed in order to maintain the phase when the first symptoms of the return to the body occur. For example, when everything becomes dim. Returning to the body is something you needn't worry about. The state will not last more than several minutes in any case, especially for novices who are literally acquainted with the techniques for maintaining the phase. Didn't work. Set yourself this goal. Make 5 to 10 attempts to leave your body upon awakening. This procedure, when followed correctly, is sufficient for 50 to 80% of the novices to get their first results. Turn back to this section if you run into a problem, as it describes the mistakes encountered in 99% of unsuccessful attempts. Never try these techniques every day. Otherwise, the success rate of your attempts will drop drastically. Spend no more than 2 to 3 days of the week on it, preferably only on days off. If you don't have an opportunity to sleep in long with no interruptions, then don't forget that cycles of indirect techniques can also be used after any other awakening. In the middle of the night, for example, or better yet, during the middle of the day and a nap, what's most important is to establish the clear intention of trying them before falling asleep. Despite the simplicity of these techniques, novices stubbornly deviate from the clear instructions following them in their own way or only halfway. Remember, what's most important beforehand. The more careful and literally you follow the instructions in this book, the better you have chances for success. 90% will obtain results within 1 to 3 awakenings if they do everything correctly from the beginning. Interesting fact, at phase school seminars, the main task consists not in explaining the proper procedure, but merely in getting participants to follow it to the letter. Even if that goal is only halfway accomplishment, success is inevitable. Typical mistakes when performing indirect techniques include a lack of an attempt to separate, forgetting simply to separate immediately after awakening before cycling techniques, even though they may lead up to 50% of all experiences, exception being awakening to movement, after which one may immediately proceed to the techniques. Lack of aggression, fewer than 4 cycles, unnecessary change of techniques and unnecessary continuations of a technique, and forgetting to separate. Excessive analysis, excessive alert awakening, no attempt or sluggish one, attempting for longer than a minute, and incomplete separation, not recognizing the phase, awakening to movement, no attempt or sluggish one, wasting the first seconds, selection of same time techniques, and the use of simple technique, false physical movement. The 4 principles of success: do it no matter what, be aggressive, be self-assured, and do it robotically. If you are successful and able to employ the indirect techniques and enter the phase at least 3 to 5 times, then you can gradually move on to the advanced textbook in order to flesh out the practice. Now you're a man or woman of the future, and all that remains is to hone your new ability. Project Elijah.